Hi, my name is Tim Westbrook. I am here at the I Love Being Sober podcast. I'm here with Jim Kreitler. Jim Kreitler is a dear friend of mine that I've known for quite some time. And so, Jim, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. The purpose of the Sober Living podcast is the purpose of this podcast is to provide educational content to people that want to get clean and sober, to parents, spouses, and friends of people that may or may not want to be clean and sober, and to anybody that is interested in learning more about recovery. So today here with Jim Kreitler, he's going to share parts of his journey through recovery along with what he has seen that works for people to get clean and sober and stay clean and sober. So Jim is the retired CEO of Calvary Healing Center, a local addiction treatment facility in operation for over 50 years. He has a master's in addiction counseling and was licensed as a therapist. But maybe more importantly, Jim has been sober since 1998 after inpatient rehab, intensive outpatient treatment, and a lifetime commitment to 12-step recovery. And he totally agrees with the statement, "I love being sober." Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks for
it.
having me, Tim.
So I guess we're, as I kind of mentioned, the purpose of this podcast is not as much to talk about your past and what didn't work, but more so let's talk about what's working. Let's talk about your journey and let's talk about what worked for you. So we'll start there. So tell me a little bit about your journey, Jim.
I will. Well, thanks, Tim, for having me, and I appreciate your efforts to spread the word and help other people. You know, my journey is not that unique from a lot of people, and yet when I first came in, I felt it was different because I didn't have the horrible circumstances in my family or the jail or the whatever. You know, I had over a life with a good family and a good education and a good upbringing. I had developed a need to use alcohol and substances to manage what can be a stressful life. And that eventually grew to a point where I couldn't stop, where I was drinking and using when I didn't want to. I was able to kind of manage those worlds of trying to be a legit guy and also having these compulsions to drink or use. I managed that for many years. And then finally I reached a point where I just couldn't. And circumstances led me to an inpatient experience. And it was at a great treatment center, Sierra Tucson, and that was a good experience. However, I only took part of what they promoted there, especially with regard to discharge plans. Uh-huh. So I love the psychotherapy. We did some deep dive. I was able to do some list work with my wife and children. I felt good, you know, got my health back, and I'm good to go. So they suggested sober living, and they suggested 12-step participation, follow up with a psychotherapist. And I unfortunately didn't take them up on that. I did my own thing. I felt good, and I went to a few meetings, went right back home. So all of a sudden, I was back in a stressful home life. I had been.
Hold on for a second before you move on.
Yeah.
Why do you think you didn't take their suggestions? Because I think that's. I hear that that happens more often than I mean, you and I know we both work in the field. It's like somebody goes to treatment for 30 days and they're like, "I'm good. Like, I got this. I appreciate your suggestions. I'll consider it." And to your point, just like
exactly. You know, it's a unique thing, you know, as far as I was down and I was desperate, considering ending my life. I mean, I really, you know, did want to be sober and whatever, but there's something, a bit of denial and a bit that I still wanted to maintain some control. And I still wanted to send things through my analyzer of whether they made sense or not. I had not fully surrendered. And unfortunately, my brain wasn't ready to make good decisions. So there was no good reason that I didn't do that. But what I've learned is that length of engagement and treatment is important. Actually working the steps with a sponsor is important.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing appropriate medication and maybe individual therapy can be important to certain people. And that was a rough lesson that I learned by not doing those things.
Right. Staying engaged for a longer period of time.
Absolutely. And the statistics from research are fairly clear on that point. I remember at Calvary, we were always encouraging people to do the next kind of level. And our patients that went through the full continuum, which was detox inpatient, day treatment, IOP, and then aftercare every Saturday for a year, their success rates were through the roof. We had a hard time quantifying just that group, separating them out from all the people that quit earlier like I did. Yeah. And some of them stayed sober, but they put their sobriety at risk by not doing the full boat. And I regret that I didn't, but after a relapse, I was able to come back and I just said, I'm going to do whatever you say. I went to IOP, I went to meetings, I got a sponsor. When IOP was over, they said, you come every Thursday night for aftercare once a week. I went until they kicked me out of that. It was that surrender and willingness to do whatever the professionals and the experts and my sponsor that I trusted that really seemed to make the difference. Yeah,
I love that. I love that. Surrender, right? It's surrendering. It's taking suggestions. It's the realization that my best thinking got me where I am today, right?
Absolutely. I thought it was, I needed to acquire certain knowledge and knowing about addiction and about recovery and things. I'm not saying it's not helpful, but I really believe that my recovery, even on a daily basis, is dependent on the depth of my surrender to both the fact that I'm an alcoholic and an addict and I don't drink or use like regular people and I can't safely do that, and my surrender to the program of recovery that I have committed to. Right.
Yeah, and I think I heard some statistics recently, and you can tell me if you, I don't remember where I heard them from, so I can't even cite them. 67% of people that stay sober for a year stay sober for 5 years, and 85% of people that stay sober for 5 years stay sober for life.
And that would make perfect sense to me. When I first got out of treatment and I thought I was good to go, I didn't have the skills or the tools in order to manage life without a substance, and I had spent 42 years of my life living that way. So it was really hard, and I had these channels in my brain that were, the neurons were lined up for me to, in certain situations, to drink or use. And I needed time in a somewhat safe environment, whether that, and that's why I'm supportive of sober living, where it's a little like a test tube. You can try out new behaviors and social situations and learn how to engage in life sober. You don't just naturally snap your fingers and have those things. And the longer I did that, the more comfortable recovery came. And then I started to be able to help other people. And what a gift that is for someone who was just a train wreck a year ago, and now people are asking, what do you think? I'm having a problem. Could you help me? It's right. Really a wonderful thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's, when we go to treatment and in therapy, we kind of work on why we got where we're at, right? And we dig into the trauma and we figure out, okay, how did I get here? But then we still, even if we feel amazing, even if somebody feels amazing after treatment, or if they don't go to treatment, regardless, like they're still programmed to live life a certain way. They're still programmed to react. Their behaviors are ingrained in their lifestyle. So it's like until we develop new healthy lifestyle habits and new behaviors to replace those old unhealthy behaviors, like that's what has to happen, right?
Absolutely. And that's really what a deep, meaningful recovery becomes. I don't want to discount that in the beginning it was really hard to not pick up a drink or a drug a day at a time. So that not using thing is really important.
Yeah.
However, after that, recovery becomes about a lot of things. And if I don't find a way to heal inside, find a way to interact with other people in relationship and community in ways that are healthy and don't use substances, then I'm going to find something to relieve those feelings. And it may be a drink, a drug, a behavior. There's all kinds of things. And so that's why I also believe that a long-term recovery, where we really get some healing inside, is important.
And what does long-term recovery look like?
Sure. Well, curiously enough, the 12-step program that I follow, and I'll go to NA or AA or CA, I find value in all of them.
Right.
There are a lot of AA meetings, so my meetings tend to be a lot of AA, but I find that it's not only a way to not drink or drug a day at a time, but there are certain values that we learn in working the steps, and there are things like honesty, service for others, humility, things that I have found are extremely helpful and important to me interacting with the world. And then another big one that I was surprised at when I came in is that there's a spiritual component to recovery, that I was able to find a very personal conception of a higher power and a God in my life, and that I found a way on a daily basis to engage him in my life.
Yeah.
And that when I turn my life over on a day-to-day basis to my higher power, I'm able to show up and do what I'm supposed to do. And the results of that are left to something I can't see or understand. But that piece has also been extremely important, and I'm really, really happy that that was a part of recovery.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. It's kind of like Tim's not in control, right? Tim doesn't have to be in control. God's in control, right?
And when we don't screw it up and we show up and do what we're supposed to do, because we're free of that result responsibility, things tend to work out pretty good. Life tends to be pretty darn good. Matter of fact, life's probably better it is better in recovery than I could have had any hope for. I was at a point where I wasn't sure I could put it back together. I had humiliated myself in front of friends and coworkers. I really thought I couldn't fix it, and that life wasn't going to be great with, in recovery, but at least I wouldn't be screwing up. Sobriety turned out to be wonderful. I love being a sober man, and that was an epiphany for me. I can have as much fun. I can go to a ball game. All the things I used to think I needed to, have a little bit of this or a drink or whatever, they're all better being sober. And that was something I didn't know before I got in.
Right. Yeah. You get to remember the baseball game. You
Absolutely.
get to remember the birthday party.
That's right. No, I was a season ticket holder for the Phoenix Suns, and I spent most of my time on the beer line or the bathroom line. Cost me a lot of money.
Yeah.
There was actually a time that the Bulls were coming to town when they were great, and Barkley was on the Suns, and I had tickets, and I went running around getting high and I never made it to the game. Still keep those tickets to remind myself just how crazy life was when I was drinking it.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I had season tickets to the Cardinals, and I can't even tell you. It's like you go to a game, and really, I don't even remember the game.
No,
it's like it's all about getting the next drink. It's more about drinking. It's a drinking. It's kind of like you have all of these hot holidays, like we just passed Cinco de Mayo, And it's like
Yes.
Cinco de Mayo, in my opinion, it's just a drinking holiday. Like,
Yes.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of experiences in life that when I'm drinking and using, I'm just not present for. I tell a story sometimes about I've been to Hawaii twice, and once I was drinking and using, and once I was sober. And I saw a lot more of Hawaii when I was sober.
Mm-hmm.
When I was drinking or using, you're in a lobby bar or in the bathroom of the hotel room most of the time. And I missed a lot when I was getting loaded, and some of the simple things, just that warm feeling of the sun on your face, hearing the birds chirping. I'm going 100 miles an hour loaded. I'm missing all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get through and not get caught. And it's good to slow down, and life is good, but we need to be present for it. And in recovery, we can do that.
Yeah. What are the three biggest gifts of sobriety for you, Jim?
Wow. Well, when I first had to go in, things with my family were very, very tense. And that's with my wife, my children who were 12 and 13 at the time, my parents who loved me to death but were scared when they found out that I was an addict. And that came back in a big way. My wife and I have been married for 41 years, and I have the best relationship with my children. So that's a big one that's come back. The other thing is that I don't hate me so much anymore. I have a depressive side, and so I can get in a little bit of a dark place if I'm not careful. But I like me well enough today in my life that I want to keep showing up for it. And at the end of my drinking and using, there was no fun in it. I wouldn't have given you a plug nickel for my life, because I really, really hated myself. And the other thing that really brought some of that back for me is the ability to help other people. I gave the corporation that supported my recovery and trip to rehab, I gave them 10 sober years, and that was good. And I showed them that we do recover. And I still occasionally hear from people from that big corporation who asked for help at the time, or who might need help. And then I was able to switch to a career in the helping profession and in treatment. And now that I'm retired, I do that by going to meetings and having sponsees and just being there. It's a little tricky now with COVID-19, but but I still have sponsees, and I might have to do more by phone. I've appreciated the Zoom meetings, but I still need that stuff, and helping other people is really a big part of what makes my life good today.
Right. That's the key, right? Getting out of myself.
Absolutely. It's extremely important. And I tell my sponsees, if you're having a really bad day or this or that, as guys, we want to troubleshoot it. And I tell them, try this. Call up somebody else and just ask them how they're doing. Don't tell them that you're having a bad day. Don't ask for advice. Just ask how they're doing and listen. And all of a sudden, your problems aren't as important, and you're feeling better about yourself. And that other guy's glad you called. So it's a good way to live.
Yeah, that's such a big, that was a big lesson for me. I can remember I was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years sober. And I remember calling my sponsor, and he wasn't calling me back. And I was like, what about me? What about Tim?
Yes.
And I realized, that's why I need to sponsor guys.
Yes.
Because I need to think about somebody else. I need to give somebody else some guidance. I need to be an example for somebody else. I need to give somebody else some leadership. And so that was a big, big lesson.
There are many aspects of recovery and the program that are counterintuitive. And that's that I help myself by helping others. I feel better about myself. Yeah. I gain my life back, or control of my life back, by giving up control. to the program and to a God of my understanding. You know, it isn't what my brain used to tell me. I had to figure it all out. And if I micromanaged everything just right, things would be okay. And now I can take a much lighter touch with my day, and I don't waste energy and emotions as much. You know, I'm certainly not perfect, on just the whys and poor me, and you know, and it frees me up to be somewhat useful.
Yeah, I read a quote this morning. It said something along the lines of, "When it's all about me, that's what I'm left with, just me."
Yes.
And that's a lonely existence, for it to be just me.
Right. And I don't want to be lonely. And I started drinking and using to be, you know, have fun and be with other people. And then I thought in early recovery, well, I'm going to probably have to give that up. And then I found in treatment and in early recovery, really good relationships. And now I have as busy a social life as I can stand, because I got involved and I did things. And it's great. And there's lots of opportunities to be helpful, even just as simple as, like I said, picking up the phone and calling somebody, or once we're allowed to go to meetings, just getting my butt in a chair. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, if I say something that helps one person, then it's a success.
It's a good day. Absolutely.
It's a good day.
And the other thing was, again, I thought that I was heading for a life that was just going to be not screwing up. And you don't need to do some of the things that me and you have done, but it is interesting to look at what's possible. So I go from a guy that couldn't show up to work and wanted to end his life, to somebody who got a master's degree and eventually a good career, whatever. And same with yourself. I look at you, and in recovery, I see that you've also become licensed. You did a triathlon, which just amazed me. Really, the world is your oyster. If you maintain your sobriety first, you can do anything that you want to do. And again, that was an epiphany for me. I thought I didn't understand that. And it took me a while to see that. And it's really wonderful to see it in other people.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about with you, Jim, is so there's the therapist, and you've got the therapist role, then you've got the sponsor, then you've got the recovery coach. And we already talked a little bit about what a therapist and what treatment does. That's digging into the trauma, that's digging into your past, that's figuring out why you are where you are, why a person is where he is. And then we've got a sponsor, which is, in my opinion, their job is typically related to the 12 steps and taking somebody through the steps. And then you've got a recovery coach. And a recovery coach is different than a sponsor. And a lot of times I hear people say, well, why, you know, a recovery coach is a paid sponsor, or why would I need a recovery coach if I have a sponsor? I have a sponsor, I have a therapist, I don't need a coach. So can you speak to your speak to coaching?
Yeah, my understanding of how those things work, and again, everybody has different resources and ability to, you know, to get to recovery and however they can. But the people that are able to have a treatment experience, a therapist, everyone should get a sponsor if they're going to be out there in the 12-step, and a coach. You know, kind of the more resources you can access, the better. But while there's some over that, there's very distinct differences. In AA, they are not going to deal with your medications or depressions or marriages or things that you can work through with your doctor or your therapist, you know. And I agree with you. While some sponsors kind of dribble over into giving job advice and financial advice or whatever, really what that is intended to be is purely a person who has been through the steps, who will guide you through the steps and be a resource to talk about sobriety things.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of other things going on in life. You're going back to work. you've moved back home after sober living, you're going to apply for a job for the first time. Those are things that the sponsor is not supposed to get involved with and has no expertise. But a sober coach may be able to get you to have a plan daily going through those things, and to know that, all right, I want to fit in a meeting and some exercise and submit some applications and, whatever it happens to be. I'm left to my own devices. My brain may not be ready to really make all the right decisions. And having a coach to both guide me and also hold me accountable. Because I've always said, when people leave treatment, I like when they go to sober living, because their ability to say no to drugs and alcohol is really in its infancy and may not be well-founded. And so they need a little more period of time where they have some accountability and guidance and for their own benefit, not for anyone else's. And a coach can help provide that through however long. That first year, though, you're going to go through experiences that you haven't gone through sober. And not all of them are associated with the steps. Some of them are just life things. Right. And so, if at all possible, use all the resources you can. It's one of the few cases where us addicts who think more is better, where it's probably really true. So.
Right. It's building that team, that support team, right? And I think you and I talked about this earlier. It's kind of like I played baseball growing up, and you've got a coach, and the coach coaches the team, right? And so you're in that team environment, and the coach is going to be super helpful. And then you've got all the other players on it, so you're all holding each other accountable. And for the most part, that's good enough for a lot of people. For most people, that's good enough. However, you've got Jimmy over here, whose dad wants Jimmy to have a little more support, a little more guidance, a little more accountability. So Jimmy's dad pays for him to get a coach, a pitching coach. And Jimmy's chances, Jimmy's always a better player because he gets more support, more accountability,
absolutely,
more coaching, just more individualized.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, while not everybody can have access to all the tools that are available to make use of recovery coaches and therapists and a good medical professional, all those things are important. And none of them are dealing with primarily the things that a sponsor does. As sponsors, you're working those steps with a sponsor. That's a separate and very important entity in its own. But your sponsor's not going to talk to you about some of these other things. So there's really, it's really helpful when you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is, as both a sponsee and as a sponsor. I mean, a sponsor, it's a volunteer position, right? Mm-hmm. And so, my job as a sponsor is to take a guy through the steps. A lot of times I do more than that. However, I'm not getting paid to be a sponsor, and sometimes I've got my own life. And
and I tell some of my sponsees, if I start giving you too much advice about career and finances, that's out of my area of expertise or our agreement, and you should call me on that, because that's not what it's about. And you're right, some sponsors do that and get too involved in some other things. And also, like you say, at any one time, you can have multiple sponsees, and you only have so much time to help somebody else manage their life.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about this morning is, you have people talk about superfoods, right? And, eat these superfoods, whether it be like kale or spinach or an acai bowl or whatever. And really, there is no such thing as a superfood for everybody. The foods that are superfoods to Tim Westbrook are not the same superfoods for Jim Kreitler. We're all different. Right. And so I have foods that my body likes. They're superfoods for me. And you've got foods that your body likes, and they're superfoods for you. And I would kind of say it's the same thing with recovery. There's no like right way or wrong way. Like, yes, this is the way you have to do it. You got to go to treatment. Then after treatment, you need to go to sober living. You need to do PHP, IOP, have a recovery. I mean, like there's just such a wide range. And I think everybody has a path that is the right path for them.
Sure, and as trained clinicians, we learned that all treatment plans should be individualized, that they should, that it's not a one size fits all, and that my issues are different than your issues. And so we need different help and different resources to help get over those. And so, one size fits all. I mean, there are certain somewhat constants that seem to be helpful to most people, and a good schedule, healthy eating, meetings. But we're different people. We arrived at today and on different paths, and our path to a healthy recovery needs to be our own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up something really good there that I heard. It's not just not drinking, right? And we've already kind of talked about this a little bit. It's not just not drinking. And I don't know about you, but when I first got sober, I was planning on getting sober for 90 days. I was going to get sober for 90 days. And then, I was going to get my life back. And then I was going to going back to living. But what I realized was that recovery is way more than just not drinking and doing drugs. Recovery is living an honest life. It's don't stop, lie, cheat, steal. And if I do lie, cheat, steal, I've got to clean it up. I've got to clean that wreckage up immediately. It's prayer.
Absolutely. The guidance of the principles of 12-step give us a direction to keep us on the beam. And if I start telling fibs or not being truthful, I may not pick up a drink that day or the next day.
Right.
But that leads me on a path where ultimately I'll then create turmoil, and a set of emotional dominoes will start falling that eventually leads me back into a corner where I'll say F it and I will pick up a drink.
Right.
So it also gives us some guidance how to stay on a path that will lead us not only to an enjoyable life, but away from that relapse, away from that drink or drug.
Yeah. So what suggestions do you have to anybody out there that is trying to get clean and sober, or to a parent or a spouse or a loved one that has somebody that they think should be in recovery? What suggestions do you have?
Yeah, you bet. Often when I was working in intake, often the first person we'd hear from would be a parent or a spouse. And, there's nothing in our prior experience that leads us to know what to do when we find out our lovely young daughter or son is all of a sudden using drugs or using heroin or whatever it happens to be. So it is important that parents get help, both to know what to do when their loved one is ready to get help, and also to know what to do when they're not ready to get help. And there are resources out there. In 12-step, it's Al-Anon. There's a program, PALS, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, and you can learn how to continue your life in a way that will be healthy and happy, regardless of what your loved one does. But also it teaches you how to end enabling, so that your loved one hopefully will make the right decision to seek help and to change. And if I was if I was a person who was struggling, I'd go for an assessment. I'd check out a meeting. Just try to keep your mind open and check it out. I didn't buy it all in one big bite. I realized recovery was what I wanted and how to achieve it in little bits and pieces. And like you, my thinking on the day I came into recovery was more, I'm going to give this a year, and if life still sucks, then I'll end my life. My thinking wasn't super healthy, and I wasn't sure it would work. It was really just my willingness to try it that was the magic for me. And then over time, I realized that, wow, I can really do this. And if I do, life's really good.
Yep. Amen to that. Okay, well, Jim, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you. And do you want to let people know how they can reach you if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, sure. If anybody would like to communicate or want some information, probably email's the best way to start. So that's JFK, like the president, PHX, like Phoenix abbreviation. So JFK PHX at pox.net.
Okay, awesome. And just so everybody knows, Jim's retired, but he is an active member of the 12-step community.
Yes.
He was involved with parents of addicted loved ones. He's still around, and my experience with Jim, I know that he's willing to be helpful in any way that he can. So
happy to help.
Thanks everybody for joining us at the I Love Being Sober podcast. Hope everybody has a great day.